Today we got an update from Warner Brothers that James Gunn would be writing and directing Man of Tomorrow, a sequel of sorts to his Superman movie, and although on the surface that sounds like a vote of confidence from Warner CEO David Zaslav, I believe that what's happening right now behind the scenes at Warner, especially when it comes to DC, is a bit more complicated. Now, for those of you that are not yet familiar with my channel, I was one of the first to report that James Gunn's Superman was a box office flop, something that is still technically true. I also was one of the first to report that Gunn wouldn't surpass Zack Snyder's Man of Steel at the box office, that Gunn was internally quietly demoted at DC after Superman underperformed, and that Warner Brothers were frantically trying to make back the money that they invested in Superman, which was far more than anything they had initially reported to the press. And in spite of James Gunn's seemingly positive announcement today, in this video I'm going to explain why nothing has really changed in the bigger picture, and that everything I've been reporting until now is in fact still true. And if you enjoy getting these type of exclusive DCU updates from an independent news source like myself, please take a second to like and subscribe, as that kind of support would really help my channel.
Do it.
As I've reported here in the past, based on James Gunn's early DCU announcement from 2023, he was looking at the time to launch both Superman and his own version of Batman, which would not have been Matt Reeves and Robert Pattinson's version. Gunn had even clarified that Reeves was considered Elseworld Batman, and that the official DCU Batman would be introduced in Gunn's The Brave and the Bold, a movie that nobody ever seems to talk about anymore. Still, up until the release of Superman, we also didn't seem to hear a lot about Matt Reeves' Batman Part 2 either. If I had to give my 2 cents here, I think that while James Gunn certainly wanted to be the main DC guy for both Superman and Batman, Matt Reeves was stuck like a thorn in his side because Reeves had already delivered pretty decent results for Warner Brothers with both his Batman and Penguin series, and they weren't interested in having 2 on-screen Batmans, but at the same time, they also didn't want to part ways with Reeves, leaving them in something of a conundrum. I suspect that Gunn, who talked a big game upon his arrival at DC, was likely told that if he could somehow outdo Matt Reeves with his Superman at the box office and get more viewers for Peacemaker than Reeves did for Penguin, perhaps he had a chance to push Reeves aside altogether, much like Gunn did with anybody else that didn't supposedly align with his vision. And as a power move, early on Gunn even managed to intercept Matt Reeves' Clayface project because he had claimed that Matt Reeves needed to stay in his lane creatively. But with Superman not coming close to Matt Reeves' box office numbers, unable to beat Zack Snyder's Man of Steel box office numbers even before adjusting for inflation, and Peacemaker Season 2 having only a quarter of the audience that the Penguin had, Matt Reeves' position at Warner Brothers has really strengthened over the past few months. And that's likely why we started hearing more and more about the Batman 2 in the press recently, while Gunn himself pivoted from talking about the entire DCU to mainly focusing on what he now refers to as the Superman saga, which he's in charge of.
I've already finished the treatment for the next story in what I'll call the Superman saga.
To me, what has clearly happened is that Gunn was told that based on Reeves' results versus his own, Reeves was going to be in charge of the Batman side of things, whereas he would stick with Superman, and the other projects that he already had in the pipeline, like Supergirl and Lanterns, which are currently filming, and I'm sure Warner Brothers are very eager to see just how those projects perform before they greenlight a ton more Gunn-driven DCU projects. And if you're all wondering, well, if Gunn couldn't deliver the box office goods with Superman, then why was he given a sequel? After all, I've been saying that Superman was a box office flop. Well, as I've said before on this channel, Gunn had one main thing going for him. While his Superman movie did not actually make back the money that was invested in it during its theatrical run, it also wasn't a colossal box office flop either, but rather a minor one. What I'm saying is that Gunn's Superman was not the Marvels type of situation, nor was it an Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny type of situation. Those movies lost hundreds of millions of dollars even after streaming and any type of ancillary revenue they generated, whereas with Superman, there was still a way to salvage it, especially if they could get a decent run on video-on-demand digital release. Now, as I've reported, initially the VOD launch for James Gunn's Superman was actually a disaster, and it barely even appeared on any streaming charts, so then Warner Brothers lowered their price for it, and it still wasn't doing well, so they lowered it again, for the second time in 2 weeks, which is never a good sign, but I will say that after they offered offered very discounted rates, it seems like Superman finally at least did some business on VOD streaming, and perhaps they even made enough money to offset Superman underperforming at the box office. Something interesting I found to support this idea is actually a recent video from Grace Randolph, of all people. Now, for those of you who are unfamiliar with Grace, she's sort of a loopy and odd lady, but she's very much a member of the Access Media, and when Gunn Superman movie came out, she couldn't praise it enough. A few days ago, though, after all of my reporting, she confirmed that Warner Brothers had to keep lowering the price of Superman on streaming so that people would actually pay for it, and then she even went on to say that Superman making some money on streaming could determine the future of Gunn's DCU.
They fell a little bit behind on the chart, price drop it a little bit, shoot back up. So we'll see how much money the movie makes when all is said and done. The information might never be released, but you want them. If you're a DC fan or you're supportive of the Gunverse, you want them to squeeze as much money out of this as they can any way possible.
And the reason why this is so significant is because it's no longer the independent and underground price of reason telling you this. This is an Access Media shill with close to 1 million followers saying it. Someone who does have access to way more chatter than I do these days, and now close to 2 months after I had reported on this stuff, she's finally catching up. And do you know what that means? That in spite of all the very generous people in the comments that always like to complain here, my analysis was spot on. And for those of you now saying, well, if as you say Warner Brothers made money from streaming, then Superman wasn't a box office flop at all, I wholeheartedly disagree. First of all, a box office flop is defined as a movie that couldn't recover its production and marketing budget through ticket sales for a movie. Could a movie later be bailed out after its theatrical release failed through other avenues? Sure, but it doesn't mean it wasn't a flop. Take for example the movie The Big Lebowski. I saw this movie years ago when it just came out in a practically empty theater, and the movie was pulled from screenings very quickly, making it a certified flop. Over the years, The Big Lebowski was able to find an audience through word of mouth and the physical media market, but you know what hasn't changed? The Big Lebowski is still, even today, considered a box office flop. And mind you, the Coen brothers movie was more of a quirky, low-budget indie production. It wasn't some type of tentpole IP with a major marketing campaign featuring the most iconic superhero of all time. I guess what I'm saying is that a movie like James Gunn's Superman shouldn't have needed to be bailed out by other sources of revenue after a disappointing box office run. If that were the case, Warner Brothers could have easily kept Zack Snyder around with his DCEU because his Man of Steel performed much better than Gunn's Superman, and Snyder also had additional sources of revenue. Gunn was brought in as the anti-Snyder. He was brought in as some type of DC savior that was supposed to take everything to a new level, but he never delivered the results that he was expected to. If he did, they would have announced a Superman sequel much sooner than they did, and maybe even his own version of Batman rather than Reeves. So this is less of a James Gunn victory, but more of a saving face compromise where he was thrown a bone and given a chance to fight another day. But I'm pretty sure that if Gunn's upcoming projects, especially Supergirl, don't produce excellent results for Warner Brothers, Gunn may find himself sidelined even more, if not completely pushed out at some point, although I don't think that would happen anytime soon, because Hollywood tends to keep studio heads around, sometimes even against all logic, like Kathleen Kennedy and Alex Kurtzman. We also don't know if Gunn's Superman sequel will even be released in 2027 either. So many things could happen until then. It could get delayed, and while not likely, it could even get cancelled. In any case, I will continue to keep you posted about all these developments, and if you want to stay informed, please make sure to like and subscribe, as it would really mean a lot to an independent news source like myself. Thanks for watching, my friends. Thank you, and good day.
I am such an awesome guy. I make so many videos. But I'm